Welcome to episode 4 of our 2024 travels. Hi, my name is Rosemary, one half of R&R Live in Life, the other being my husband Rick. This compilation of photographs is of some of the amazing places and ever-changing landscapes we have visited from Port Lincoln, Cummings Lookout, Lake Hamilton and Elliston. I hope you enjoy watching just a small snapshot of what we have seen. Today, we leave Port Lincoln and continue along the Flinders Highway that runs parallel to the western coast of the Eyre Peninsula, through undulating farmland towards Elliston, about 170 kilometres away. Only small settlements lie along this ever-changing section of the highway. Long stretches of tree-lined road were intermingled with varied countryside, including Lake Greenley, a natural lake that covers a surface area of 22 square kilometres to the west, and Lake Malat to the east. Sand ridges, rich undulating farmland with sheep farming and cereal grain growing. We had been driving for a while when we came to a section of the highway, in reality just a strip of road between the natural features of Lake Hamilton and the ocean. The lake, a freshwater lake, is 7 miles long and 1 mile wide, was named after George Hamilton, the Commissioner of Police in South Australia, by Edward John Eyre on his explorations in 1840. The station, Lake Hamilton, covered around 2,134 square miles. Maurice Price acquired the station early on in the 1850s after purchasing Sheringa and Malachi. There were many local Aboriginal people on his leasehold, and he also employed some Chinese workmen, and at the time was running around 29,000 head of sheep and 250 horses. Adjacent to Lake Hamilton was Cummins Lookout, a memorial site dedicated to Leo Cummins, who was tragically lost at sea in June of 1959 after the fishing cutter Wangari was wrecked on the rocks at the base of the cliffs near Kayana while collecting craypots. Leo was from a pioneer family of the Sheringa district. The lookout had spectacular uninterrupted views of Point Drummond to the south and the rugged cliffs of Sheringa in the north, views of Hamilton Lake, and our first glimpse of the stunning Great Australian Bight. On a craggy pinnacle adjacent to the lookout, a family of osprey had made their nest. We had left Gidget at the bottom of the hill, and Rick and I enjoyed the walk to the top, much to the amusement of some other tourists who had driven up. Both Lake Hamilton and the ocean view were spectacular, not to mention the invigorating walk up and down the hill. I was fascinated to see the dry stone walls or fences common in the area in the 19th century, as they caught my eye as we drove further along the highway. Believed to have dated back to the 1850s, this type of fencing was a cheap, convenient, and preferred form of fencing, with many miles of it being built on the west coast. One sure way to get rid of some of the rocks scattered across the land, though there sure were plenty of rocks still left in the fields. It appears likely that the stone walls were built by Chinese shepherds who arrived in the area after the European shepherds had left to seek their fortunes on the Victorian goldfields. On reaching Elliston, we parked up Gidget at the golf course free camp overlooking Elliston on the shores of the stunning Waterloo Bay. Elliston is at the very heart of the Wild West country, with dramatic massive limestone cliffs and quiet beaches. Inland were rolling hills dotted with sheep, mixed farming and cereal growing country, all within sight of the most dramatic coastline on the Eyre Peninsula. Our first stop was at Waterloo Bay Lookout, giving us our first taste of the bay. Our first sightseeing adventure was to drive along the Little Bay Clifftop Loop. From the lookout we had superb views of the outlying islands nestled offshore, Waterloo Bay and the Elliston township with its silos and farmland beyond. I followed the little coastal walking trail a short way along the stunning limestone cliff tops. I was intrigued by the waves crashing into Bird Rock, which stands just a little off Wellington Point. Along the edge I found all kinds of shells thrown up on the cliffs by the crashing waves, and the day being overcast and a little stormy, the spray of the waves could be felt. The changes in the colour of the water as the waves rolled in across the reef extending from each headland, the swirling eddies and large swell as the open ocean meets the calmer waters of the almost circular Waterloo Bay. The waves crashing in from the Great Australian Bight were spectacular, and I watched for ages, trying to catch the massive power and the enormous impact the waves had on the coastline. I was mesmerised. If not for the showers that threatened, I could have stood and watched for hours as each set of waves resulted in different seascapes. Here I was seeing just how powerful Mother Nature manipulates and shapes the environment. As per usual, when driving into a new seaside town, we ventured to the jetty that gave us the opportunity to stretch our legs. Erected in 1900 to replace the old jetty, the new jetty provided a much needed improvement to the shipping facilities. The jetty has been heritage listed due to its steel pylons. These were screwed into the seabed by a horse-drawn winch. The jetty is 1,389 feet, or approximately 427 metres in length. Just beyond the jetty lies the Anxious Bay clifftop loop and sculptures that begin at Wellesley Point before continuing to Salmon Point and further along to Cape Phineas and on to Anxious Bay before returning to Elliston. Along the way, we discovered the diversity of ecosystems along the cliff tops and learnt about the history of the area from the many information boards along the trail. Not only that, we viewed spectacularly, uniquely Australian coastal sculptures that were dotted along the coastline. The sculptures were constructed to promote a spirit of reconciliation, helping to forge a renewed and healing sense of community through tolerance and understanding. On Wellington and Wellesley Point, it is possible to see the unusual weevil fossilised cocoons, which are reputedly to be over 100,000 years old. We continued along the cliff top to Cape Phineas, a headland located at the southern extremity of Anxious Bay. It really was a dramatic and beautiful coast, and was certainly an unforgettable experience. Elliston was planned and named by Governor Jervois in 1878. Matthew Flinders sailed past Waterloo Bay in 1802, naming the Waldegrave Islands and Anxious Bay. The Elliston Township Bay was later named Waterloo Bay in 1865 on the Golden Jubilee of the Battle of Waterloo, hence the names Wellington Point and Wellesley Point at its entrance. Elliston became the central port for the region from which the early settlers transported their wool and wheat by sailing vessels and later steamships. Road transport took over after 1965. On land, Edward John Eyre explored the area, naming Lake Newland in 1840. Settlers took up holdings sometime around 1847. On leaving Elliston, we stopped in at the community hall to fill up with water. A mural around the hall was impressive, not just for its size, but the details in every aspect of the scenes. The mural was finished in 1992 and repainted in 2014, and depicts the life of Elliston, taking in both the maritime and rich agricultural heritage. It was remarkable how each section was interwoven with the next. Certainly a brilliant piece of artwork. Like every day, I never really know what is in store, from people's amazing creativity to nature's exceptional and stunning beauty and incredible wonder. Our travels today took us past farming country, some paddocks bordered by sand ridges, lakes and long stretches of roadway. Our side trip today was to stop in at Murphy's Haystacks. I was really glad that we did. What a sight! The haystacks, some of them really do look like old-fashioned haystacks, are a series of dramatically weathered granite outcrops known to geologists as Inselbergs, a hill that looks like a rocky island rising sharply from the sea. It is believed that the haystacks, which are composed of pink granite, are said to be over 150 million years old. The pillars and boulders have been weathered and sculptured into their present form about 100,000 years ago, when the granite hills of the district were inundated and all but buried by calcareous dune sand about 33,600 years ago. The granites were originally hidden deep in the Earth's crust, probably some 7 to 10 kilometres below the Earth's surface. Subsequent erosion of the surrounding land surface has gradually revealed the forms we saw today. Some of the haystacks are pillars while others are boulders. The distinction between the two forms is that pillars merge unbroken with the underlying bedrock, whereas boulders are clearly detached. Technically, the Inselbergs are formed by uneven weathering of crystalline rock, where densely fractured compartments break down through weathering more quickly than massive unfractured compartments. But to me, the gradual weathering has shaped the granite to reveal the weird and wonky pillars and boulders we were seeing. We wandered around between the boulder outcrops, reading the informative interpretive signage, and marvelled at the landscape around us, before continuing on to Streaky Bay. Streaky Bay is an important small service centre on the edge of the only safe deep-water harbour between Port Lincoln and King George Sound in Western Australia. While the town has a wonderfully casual Mediterranean feel, its real attraction is that it is surrounded by some superb, remarkable coastal scenery. The next morning we made our way northwest of Streaky Bay to drive the Cape Bow loop that took us first past a section of mangroves to some absolutely stunning coastline. Cape Bow's scenic drive gave us magnificent views of an exposed coastline including the Razorbacks, Whistling Rocks, the Blowhole, Haleys and Back Beaches. Our first stop was at Cape Bower, a high limestone headland that marks the northern end of Covasart Bay and recedes east to the sheltered waters of Point Gibson and south to the ocean beaches of Covasart Bay. Unfortunately, we were not lucky enough to see the white-bellied sea eagles or eastern osprey that nest on the island's cliffs and sea stacks along this stretch of the Eyre Peninsula and feed in the shallow waters of the cliff tops. Our second stop was at Whistling Rocks and the Blowholes. These unique geological formations are created when vertical fractures in the limestone cliffs become enlarged over thousands of years. We were only able to see small spouts of water as it was low tide, but did hear the whistling created when the waves rolled in. The coastal limestones of the Eyre Peninsula contain multiple natural vertical pipes called solution tubes that occur when the limestone is dissolved by the chemical reactions of rainwater, air, and soil organics acting on the limestone. These pipes are seen frequently in the exposed limestone cliffs along the coasts. The pounding of the waves and drenching in spray and runoff can further enlarge them by erosion. If these spaces are connected at the base with open air, waves breaking around them forces the air and seawater up through the spaces under pressure, creating the sights and sounds of Whistling Rocks and the Blowholes. Our next stop was at Haley's Beach, a stunning strip of pristine coast where colourful shrubs clung to the dunes and clear swells roll in untouched, not to mention the stunning beach. Migratory and residential shorebirds roost and feed at Haley's Beach, where the living conditions of plants on the coastal cliff tops is very tough, with the winds often very strong and the sea spray almost constant. Hence, plants develop special features to help them survive in this harsh environment. Most plants grow low to the ground and have tough and narrow leaves that are salt tolerant and which reduces the surface area and water loss from the leaves. We were amazed by the surfers at Back Beach, located in the middle of Covasart Bay, the nearest open beach to Streaky Bay, as they tackled the powerful waves of the Southern Ocean. We were just happy to stand on the lookout and enjoy the beach and low sand dunes that began to merge with the high coastal dunes and cliffs of Cape Bower. To the south towards Cape Westall, low limestone cliffs gave way to pockets of sandy beaches interspersed with shoreline limestone reefs that created great waves. From Back Beach we made our way back into Streaky Bay and took a stroll along the jetty constructed between 1891 and 1896 and as a reminder of the town's importance as a port for both the transportation of wheat from the hinterland and fishing in the bay. We then made our way northeast to Eyre Anchorage, overlooking the conservation area of Eyre Island, located 700 metres offshore. Eyre Island was taken up in 1888 by Thomas Simons, who grew wheat and fished. Other owners tried milking cows, running pigs, sheep, and even turkeys. In 1966, Eyre and nearby Pig-Faced Island was dedicated as a flora and fauna conservation parks. We continued on to Palubi Beach, just 20 kilometres north of Streaky Bay. The gently curving beach is approximately 2 kilometres of sand and shallow water that is sheltered by Eyre Island. Rick and I could see why this beach was a sought-after camping spot with its pristine, calm waters. In the early 1880s, ketches anchored offshore and rowboats were used to land provisions, while wool and grain was loaded from the beach. A special dray with double shafts took the bags out to the cargo boats, which sometimes took up to 4 days to load when tides and weather affected the work. During the 1890s and 1900s, pioneer families of the Palubi area congregated on the beach for a picnic each New Year's Day. At a meeting held in 1913, it was decided to hold beach sports on the day, and it is said to still continue to this day. Originally, there was a race meeting, a 1,600-metre event along the beach at low tide for horses, and for years it was a remarkable sight to see the stands and saddling enclosures, all weathered by the sea, standing forlornly waiting for the next race meeting. Needless to say, stories about the race meetings are legends, with such hilarious practices as filling a jockey's pockets up with sand to get him up to the correct handicap weight. After spending 3 days exploring the Streaky Bay area, it was time to move on. Join us next time as we continue along the Flinders Highway that will take us to Ceduna on the far west coast of South Australia, where we see huge stockpiles of salt from Pinky Point Lookout being loaded onto container ships at Flinders Port. Take care and stay safe. Cheers for now, Rick and Rosemary. R&R, living life.